Hey, what's going on YouTube? UA Reviews here, and today I'm back with a Football 101 video, and today we're going to continue to talk about football cleats, and in this part we will talk about mid-cut and high-cut cleats. Alright, so in this part, like I said, we will be talking about mid and high-cut cleats. First off, I'm just going to give you a couple of differences and, different kinds of styles of like cleat patterns that you can get, whether it's D or molded cleats. And then, just kind of talk about some of the differences, the high top cleats that we have out today, like the highlight cleats and other various mid-cut cleats, and then, what positions they're good for. And we'll try to cover as much of that as we can in this part. First off, there's going to be a lot of different, like with the low cleats, there is, in today's football cleat realm, I guess you'd say, there are more options for mid-cut cleats. It used to be kind of cut and dry. It was either you got one style and that was what you got. Now today we got a few more options. Companies have been competitive, and with this cleat, this is a mid-cut Under Armour cleat and that is molded, so it is pretty versatile about what surfaces it can go on. But I remember when this cleat came out, there was also an option on if you wanted to get the D version. So you got detachable if you wanted that. If you played on grass, you had a detachable version. Personally, I like that they've started, making, and they've been doing this for a few years now, because actually these cleats were my cleats when I was a senior in high school, and so I mean that's been a few years now, and that was one thing that has changed. They have more options. You have a molded cleat pattern, so it's able to go on multiple surfaces, such as it's good on turf and grass to a certain extent. But then you have your D cleats, which is a pretty common cleat to have for if you play on thick grass. It's a great cleat to have. Not a great cleat for detachable is just not something you want to go with. But we will talk about kind of the differences between molded and detachable a little more. You have these options, in a mid cleat. Definitely one of the biggest things about mid cleats is the extra support that you get. Now, sometimes these cleats are going to cost a little more. Sometimes they might cost a little less. One thing I can tell you about this cleat, which I think this cleat came out in 2007, and if you think back, that is a couple years old. This was a very innovative cleat when it first came out. I remember the cost of this cleat might shock you. Now, you might look at this cleat and say, if this cleat was on the market today, you might think it's a $85, $90 cleat. Well, it was actually $130 for this cleat. I don't think I paid that for it. I think I bought it about a year later. And that is the same exact price as the Under Armour Highlight cleat of today. It is also $130. So you can kind of tell how the times have changed in just a few years, how much has really evolved. Now, what I would definitely say about these kind of cleats, you're getting these cleats, the purpose of a mid-cut cleat is, for higher protection. It's going to weigh more, obviously, than a low-cut cleat, for a speed receiver or a defensive back that needs the speed. This cleat is going to offer more protection. Now, the weights on these can sometimes vary. Sometimes they can vary up to, some can be anywhere from 13 to 14 ounces, depending on the size of the shoe. I have a big size shoe, so mine obviously weigh a lot more because there's more material packed into these things just to make the shoe bigger. Highlight cleats are pretty lightweight cleat, for being a high top, which is kind of the selling point of the highlight cleat, is that it has a low cut design. Because if you've seen my review, and I've talked about that, it has a low-cut design but gives you a high-top feeling. Now, in today, they really don't make a true high-top cleat. And a high-top cleat, to me, would be, since this is considered a mid-cut, it would go up even a little bit higher. I remember those cleats out back when I played in high school, but now they don't even make a true high-top cleat, which would be a cleat that extends just a little bit higher than this. There's a definite difference between these two cleats here, these nitros, and then I believe these are called the demolitions. But there is a definite kind of a size difference. This one's just a little bit higher. offers, just a few other ins and outs. This was truly an innovative cleat at the time when it came out. But they really and today they don't make a high top version cleat. I know that New Balance, that's actually a cleat brand. They make a couple of really good high top cleats, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So that's one. I really haven't done a whole lot of actual research on the high top cleats because it kind of feel like they've kind of dropped off the face of the earth. I know Under Armour did used to make a high top cleat. I do remember around this time when these cleats came out, they had several different versions, but whatever the case may be, it didn't pan out. Some Lyman cleats, like if you think of like the Nike Land Sharks or the Under Armour Hammer cleats, that's kind of considered a Lyman cleat. And it kind of offers as well a mid to high protection depending on what you can find out of there. So now we're going to kind of talk about positions. So sometimes when we talk about mid to high cleats, we'll really kind of focus on mid cleats because we can't really consider high cleats just yet for Lyman. But people always associate, bigger cleats are going to be for our bigger players, linemen, defensive linemen, offensive line. But sometimes I always get questions like on some of these videos that I do, especially with cleats. What cleats are good for linemen? A lot of people ask on my UA highlight video if they work for linemen. And since my body style, I'm a lineman. I ain't gonna admit. I'll admit to you, I'm 250 pounds, and I can put some weight on these cleats. And I feel like that this cleat in general, which is deemed for a speed player, the highlights. It's probably best to go with the U8 Brawler. Now, I have talked about that before. U8 Brawler is just kind of like a mid-cut cleat that has the high top feeling. It is that cleat right there. And I don't actually have that cleat and would love to have that to show you, but it's kind of what I'm dealing with now. Now, I always get the questions on the highlight video about, if, say, and there's all those positions where they sometimes don't designate a certain cleat for, such as like linebackers, tight ends, running backs, sometimes even fullbacks. Sometimes, they don't have a specific cleat, or even quarterbacks to that extent sometimes. But it's really based on, what you're, like I said in the low cleats section of this video series, it's all about your play. If your preference on playing. So let's just pretend you're a tight end. We'll just use me for an example. Let's say I'm a tight end, and let's say I'm more of a blocking tight end. Our offense doesn't run a whole lot of plays for a tight end, but when a tight end goes in the game, you're expected to be pretty much a 6th or 7th lineman out there. I would prefer to have a very protective cleat out there as a lineman, or as a tight end. Sorry. But let's just throw it out there and say I'm a receiving tight end. I got some ball skills. They effectively use me in the passing game. I'd probably want to go with the highlight just because it gives me a high top design in case I do have to block in there on some plays, and then other plays I'm going out as a receiver. So I want something that's fast. That would be an example. With linebackers, it's kind of the same on protection wise and speed wise. So if you're a linebacker, you're able to if you're in there run stopping, hitting guys down, you got to be taking on guards, fullbacks, centers. You might want a protective cleat. But then also, let's say you're going up against teams that, or let's just say you're more of a coverage linebacker. Let's say you're a middle linebacker, you're a coverage linebacker. You might need something that's a little more lightweight. And it can even go back to, you might want, if you want you want a low cleat because you are kind of a speed player, and that's the same thing with outside linebackers. If you play a true 9 position on the line, you're considered a linebacker, a stand-up backer. You might want to have something that's going to be able to beat the tight end or beat the tackle off the ball. That would be something where you want to go with a lightweight cleat. But, you know, something that's still got, you know, a good amount of protection, you know, sort of like the highlight cleats. So, I mean, we can talk about this all day and, you know, throw out different kinds of scenarios or whatever, but there's a lot of options, you know, for all football players. I would encourage you, you know, if you are new to football, go to a store like Academy Sports and Outdoors, Dick's Sporting Goods, whatever you have in, you know, your nearest town, and just try on different types of cleats and just think about how you are as an athlete. And, you know, are you a speed guy? You know, if you're a lineman, you know, what's your play style? You just need to figure out what works for you. Now, when we come back in the last part, we will talk about the differences between some of the different brands. Now, Nike is going to name their molded cleats different than Under Armour. Same thing with Adidas. We'll kind of go over those different brands, just kind of talk about different ways you can just kind of figure out for yourself what you need. I kind of touched on it a little bit, like I said, with, you know, preferences, but we'll kind of dive into that just a little bit more in the last part of this video. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this third part here. Second part, I'm not sure what it'll be, but nonetheless, we got this video in. So with that, that's going to do it for now. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram for updates on the channel. And just check back next week for the last installment of the Football Cleats series here on Football 101. We'll see you next time.